Well, I said just before the break, and it's coming. It's on the way. The government's talking about it. They're looking at to make getting a driver's license easier, including scrapping the full license test. Transport Minister Chris Bishop says the focus is on efficiency, i.e. making licenses more accessible, affordable, and, well, faster to get. Other changes on the table include fewer vision tests, a clean driving record requirement, and a zero alcohol limit for all learner and restricted drivers. An official announcement is expected any day now, and changes are likely to come mid next year. But not everyone is convinced that this will actually make the road safer. New Zealand is one of the worst youth road safety records in the developed world. 15 to 24-year-olds caused 75 fatal crashes last year. Almost 90 people in the same age bracket died and more than 600 were seriously injured. Couple that with a high fail rate, around 40% fail their full licence test the first time. 40%. Critics say the government could be missing a bigger problem, lack of training. Dylan Thomsen from the AA points out that while New Zealand has 2 practical tests, there's far less emphasis on preparation compared to other countries. And Dylan joins me now. G'day, Dylan.
Hey, Leah, how are you doing?
Good, my friend. Nice to talk again. The government wants to make it easier and cheaper for people to get a licence. Currently, almost 40% fail their full licence test the first time. I mean, I thought that's quite a high number, isn't it? Why do you think it's so high?
Well, there's a little bit of detail behind that figure that we actually delved into, and if you look at the rate for New Zealand drivers, so our people who are getting the licence here, the fail rate is less. It's down around sort of 20 to 25%. Whereas the full licence test also is for overseas drivers coming into New Zealand and converting, and their fail rate is higher. So that 40% figure is I think just it's a little bit simplistic because it's capturing 2 different groups. It's capturing people who have gone through the learner, the restricted, and are now onto their full test in New Zealand, and the fail rate isn't as high amongst them. And then it's also capturing the people who have come in from an overseas country, are just doing the one test to convert their licence, and their fail rate is higher. So New Zealanders are not failing quite as badly on the full licence test as that figure means.
That's interesting.
And the main reasons that people fail the tests, they tend to be basically the most common ones are that they are going too fast, so they are going above the speed limit, and also seeing something, coming up to an intersection or something like that, going when the tester deems that there wasn't actually a safe gap for them to go through, or going through a giveaway sign when they shouldn't have, or those kind of fails. So it's, the most common ones are around speed and doing something that you shouldn't in terms of an intersection where you should have given way or you shouldn't have gone.
Okay. You've said our licensing system, though, is too easy compared to other countries. In what respect?
Well, if we look at New Zealand compared to most similar countries, overseas you've got 1 or 2 approaches. There's either the professional approach, where you have to do a certain amount of professional training before you can get your licence, or there's the non-professional approach, where you have to do a certain amount of hours of practice, which can just be with your mum, your dad, your uncle, whoever's the fully licensed driver who's taking you out as the supervisor. And New Zealand doesn't have either of those. So we've got the non-professional approach, so you don't have to go and do any professional training. No. But most other countries have introduced a certain number of hours where they say, before you can get your equivalent of our restricted license, before you can start driving solo, you need to have completed, and it's normally between 50 to 120 hours. Different countries have different figures of the amount of practice that they require. But New Zealand is kind of an outlier now, that we are the only country that we could find that doesn't have any requirement for a certain amount of practice before you get your restricted license.
Right. What country wants 120 hours? That's quite high.
That is the highest that we've seen, and it's more than one place. But the closest to home is actually the Aussie state Victoria. So over in Victoria, they you need to do 120 hours, and that's right up there. I think from memory, New South Wales might be about 100 hours, but Victoria,
and that's
across
a
the
mix.
ditch
Is that a mix with professional and like family members as well?
It can be. There's no requirement for any professional training
so
in that regard. So you can do the whole 120 hours just with mum or dad, or whoever it is. And that's one thing that through this whole debate that's been going on, I think a few people have gotten wrong about our position a few times at the AA. We're not saying that we want people to have to do any professional training. We're saying we think we should introduce at least 60 hours of practice before you can get your restricted license. That could be just with mum or dad or whoever. You could do all those 60 hours, but we do think we would like more people to use professional training because we think it really actually gives a better learning to drive experience. So we'd like to see some incentives. So if you do an hour with a professional instructor, that counts for 2 or 3 hours towards your 60 in terms of practicing. So you could get there quicker with professional training.
Right, I see what you're saying. I think, look, Dylan, I know we've spoken about this before, but when I think about, say, if it came in and there was 60 hours practice, say just using your family, going out with, mum or dad or uncle or whoever's got a full license. I always think, though, I think back to when I was learning and everyone in my family was terrible. Terrible as in my mum was too jumpy, my dad didn't have time, and my sister was also panicky. So it's like, you know what I'm saying? Are you actually going to be taught anything by... your parents might be really bad drivers.
Look, geez, there's a lot in that. There's a lot in that, Leah. But I think, first off, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why we think everybody who can should get some professional training. And we think that not only do you learn more in a quicker space and get exposed to the best standard driver training, so you don't necessarily have some bad habits being passed on.
Well, that's right.
But the other part of that answer is that the countries that have introduced these measures, all the ones that we've looked at, they have had quite significant crash reductions after they have been introduced. So even though it might not, it might not be the best with mum or dad, and it might be tough. You might not be lucky enough to have somebody who is naturally a very calm driving instructor in the passenger seat there next to you, but still clocking up more hours, getting exposed to more different types of driving experiences and situations will still serve you well. And generally the countries we've looked at have had a 10 to 20% reduction in severe crashes amongst young drivers after they have extended their learner period, because that's the other thing that we think we should go from 6 months to 12 months. So a longer learner period, bringing in these practice hours, they've had crash reductions because just clocking up more time on the road and getting exposed to more situations serves our young people really well for when they're driving on their own and they're not encountering something for the first time and trying to figure out, hold on, what should I do here? What's going on? Decisions have to be made in split seconds sometimes. So more practice is always going to be good.
I've always thought that what's important is to drive in varied conditions when you're learning. So I would, I'm kind of, I know what you're saying about the 60 hours. I'm not completely sold on that, but I would like to see driving. You've had to have shown that you've driven with a professional, like someone that's got their full license, in the rain or on a highway, like a long distance, or on a motorway in peak traffic, well, depending on where you live, of course. Those kind of situations, because I know that I'd been driving for about 3 years before I drove into my first big city in Auckland, and I just crapped myself, Dylan, and I think I did everything wrong. And I'd had my license for nearly 4 years, but I hadn't got out of, my tiny towns. So by the time I rocked into Auckland, I was a mess. So I think that's kind of important as well.